I don't think there's a more quintessentially South African car than the Volkswagen Polo Vivo. A car that was meant to be a simple, efficient and affordable budget hatchback, but that somehow ended up becoming a full-blown cultural phenomenon. So then, let's have a conversation. Let's talk about the VW Polo Vivo and South Africa's love affair with small, economical budget cars. Because when you really think about it, it's kind of wild how a humble hatchback has managed to take up so much space, not only in our hearts, but in our culture and our economy as well. Guys, just before we get into the video, we have launched our membership subscription and we are bringing back the C&J vlog series. We're also going to be doing things like live streams. We're going to be doing member only shorts. We're going to be doing member only polls. There are a whole bunch of benefits to signing up as a member. You also get early access to our videos and it's very cheap, I'll be honest. So if that's something you are interested in, if you've been wanting to see the vlog series continue, we are going to be continuing it for members only, so do click that join button if you're interested. But yeah, that's it. Back to the video. The story of the Polo Vivo actually goes all the way back to 1983 South Africa. Mark I Golf had been sold in the country since 1978 and had been moderately successful sales-wise amongst the country's middle class. But by 1983 it was time for the Mark I Golf to kind of grow up a little bit and catch up with the times, which VW did by launching the Mark II Golf at the Frankfurt Motor Show in 1983. It was an improvement on the Mark I Golf, featuring stuff like a more refined body design. More refined, not better. The Mark I is better than the Mark II. I think that's not even a controversial opinion. But yeah, the Mark II Golf also got ABS braking and generally just more contemporary packaging. But by the time we got it in South Africa, it was priced at around 12 to 18,000 rands, way more expensive than the 4 to 5,000 rands that the Mark I had cost a few years before. Add to this the fact that South Africa was facing really bad international sanctions at the time. It was also facing a lot of foreign investment withdrawal. You're also facing a lot of political unrest and protest from groups like the ANC and the UDF, and it was no wonder why this car didn't go that well for VW in South Africa. It was just way too expensive and launched at the wrong time. I actually made a full video about the Citi Golf, going over the full history of that car and what the political and economical state of the country was at the time. I sound like Jaden Smith. Let's talk about the political and economic state of the world right now. But yeah, I went over the conditions surrounding the launch of the Mark II Golf in South Africa. It's a whole 40-minute video about the Citi Golf. So if you want a more detailed breakdown of that, go watch that. But let's move on with the story here. But because of everything that was happening, Peter Sill, the then marketing director of VW South Africa, and Baron Klaus van Oortzen came up with an idea that would change the VW Golf forever. They decided to use the Mark I as a template to build a cheaper, slightly more modernized, brightly colored and decaled up version of the Mark I that they called the Citi Golf. It was targeted towards middle-class university students and first-time buyers and was only available in red, yellow and blue, which was very appealing for this clientele. These were relatively inexpensive, reliable small cars that had ads that kind of leaned into the bright aesthetic to attract that younger buyer. And this strategy worked because Citi Golf started popping up more and more on our roads, making them very popular not only with the people who could afford them, but also very popular with the people who were less fortunate. You see, I say people who were less fortunate because the nature of apartheid meant that people who weren't, Caucasian couldn't establish a line of credits, which made it very, very difficult to obtain cars. Even cheaper cars like the Citi Golf couldn't be obtained because they couldn't establish a line of credit. So this car was kind of unattainable for those groups when it first launched. It was still an object of desire you know, in these groups, but they just couldn't attain it. They could not buy it. They wanted it bad, but unfortunately, because of the structures that were in place at the time, they just couldn't buy it. Now, of course, there's nuance to everything. I am sure there are exceptions, but I am talking about the majority of people in these racial groups that I am talking about. They couldn't afford the Citi Golf at the time. That all changed though around the 90s when we got our democracy, because those previously oppressed racial groups started to have far greater financial freedom and could actually afford expensive stuff like cars. Now, VWSA recognized this shift, and being a corporate entity, they are capitalized on it by shifting their marketing to pander to a wider audience, which worked wonderfully. I go on a full rant about this in the video about the Citi Golf. Watch that video, it's an entertaining watch. I'm not gonna go on that rant here, but what it boiled down to was, oh, now they're gonna pander to these groups just because these groups have the money now, but they didn't want to make the car accessible before they had the money. It's a whole thing. Watch that video if you're interested in that. But then let's move on. But the reason the shifting of the marketing worked is because this was the same small, reliable cars that people had been wanting for years but couldn't afford, that they now had the opportunity to afford, which made the Citi Golf start popping up absolutely everywhere. It had now transformed from something only a fortunate few could afford to a national symbol of progress and empowerment. From the 90s onwards, it would be offered with a range of different engines, trim levels, and special editions that cemented it as a local automotive icon. The car would also get a series of facelifts and updates over its lifespan, like the dashboard from the Skoda Fabia in 2004, the circular rear light insert in 2006, and fuel injection in 2008. And by 2009, this car was still a hot commodity. It was selling like 20,000 units annually, but the simple truth was it had to die. Let me explain. You see, this car was still fundamentally at its core a car from the 1970s, and the times were changing. By 2009, the car had to comply to a lot of emissions and safety regulations that it would have cost VW a lot of money to kind of make the car comply with. It just didn't make sense for VWSA to make the car more compliant. It just had to die. On top of this, because the car was priced so cheaply, VW was actually making a very thin profit margin of the car, which would only continue to get thinner as parts for the car continued to get more expensive and more rare, as parts manufacturers were moving on to new things or just like ceasing to exist themselves. So yeah, in August 2009, 1000 final edition models of the Citi Golf called the Citi Mark 1s would be produced, commemorating the life of one of the most quintessentially South African cars to ever be produced. But people still needed a small, economical and affordable car that would live up to the Citi Golf, and VW would satisfy this need in 2010 with the launch of the Polo Vivo. The VW Polo Vivo was launched on the 11th of March 2010 and would be a reimagined version of the Mark IV Polo that had been produced since the early 2000s. Like the Citi Golf, it would be a locally produced vehicle, having 70% of its parts being produced locally as well. It would get a 63 kilowatt 1.4 liter engine paired to a 5-speed manual gearbox that aids around 7.3 liters of petrol per 100 kilometers and would start at around 100,000 rands in terms of pricing. So it was relatively cheap, efficient and reliable, kind of like an exact copy of the Citi Golf formula, which would quickly make it one of the best-selling cars in the entire country, selling 25,500 units by May 2011, only 1 year after its launch. The rapid rise in popularity of the Polo Vivo would lead to VW wanting to diversify the model range, which led to a automatic gearbox in 2011 and the slightly more powerful and lower Polo Vivo GT that would launch in the same year. In 2013, yet another variant would be added to the Vivo lineup in the form of the Vivo Max, featuring raised suspension, 17-inch Budapest wheels, twin tailpipes, roof rails, and a retrimmed interior to kind of lean into the crossover segment. I'll be honest, I don't know why VW made this car. I don't understand this car. This car confuses me. This car scares me. I don't understand the people who drive these cars. Honestly, I don't understand why VW made the Vivo Max. It is just a very confusing car that I do not want to look at or think about anymore. So let's move on. The Vivo would get a facelift in 2014 after 149,500 units were sold since it launched only 4 years prior. It's crazy. It would get a new wheel, headlight and grille design, as well as interior improvements such as Bluetooth connectivity and different seat fabrics. But the base formula was largely kept the same because it simply just worked. The first edition of the Polo Vivo would sell 193,343 units before its production would end in 2018, having been reimagined a few times through 3 special editions: the Citi Golf kind of homage version that they did called the Citi Vivo, and a commercial variant as well. VW would come back and refresh the Vivo in February 2018, now basing it on the Mark V Polo. Got a new interior, refined versions of the 1.4 and 1.6 liter engines, and more optional extras. This generation of the Vivo would also get a version of the Max called the Vivo Sound Edition in August of 2019. Once again, something that confuses and frankly scares me, that I want to move on from and not talk a lot about. The Vivo Mswenko would be launched in September 2020 to commemorate 10 years of the Vivo moniker. There'd also be the Black Edition that launched, and in 2023 the second edition of the Polo GT, what was at the time and probably still is now the latest edition of the VW Polo Vivo, a car that by 2022 had sold 354,000 units in just 12 years, sitting very comfortably amongst the ranks of the best-selling cars in South Africa. So yeah, despite 2 generations, countless facelifts and the rise of more competition, VW stayed true to the formula: simple, reliable and affordable mobility built right here in South Africa. And that's really the key to the success of the Polo. It didn't need to be a luxury car, just needed to work and work here in South Africa, and it did that, and it succeeded for it. So now that we've kind of answered the question of how we got to the Polo Vivo, we're brought to a bigger question of how did these cars get so popular? How did cars like the Polo Vivo get so popular in South Africa?
The Renault Kwid is on sale in South Africa for 119,000 Rand. That's it.
Well, the answer to the question of how these cars got so popular kind of just boils down to the South African economy not doing too hot right now. And that's kind of putting it lightly if you've been seeing everything that's been going on in this country lately. The rising cost of living, high fuel prices and increasing interest rates make it nearly impossible for regular South Africans to afford larger, more luxurious vehicles. And because of this, more and more people have been leaning towards buying small, economical cars that are very easy to run and very affordable to finance and own, which like you don't even need to think about. That just makes sense, right? It just makes sense. Everything is getting just way more expensive in this country, and having to juggle electricity, water, food, school fees potentially, and a car payment on top of that is getting more and more infeasible for more and more people. It is so bad, in fact, that according to the Debtbusters 2025 money stress tracker, even households in South Africa earning more than 35,000 rands a month are drowning in debt just to keep up with life, just to maintain their lifestyle because of the rising cost of living. All of this makes cars like the Suzuki Swift, cars like the Hyundai i10, cars like the Renault Kwid extremely attractive to prospective buyers because of just how affordable they are compared to everything else that's on the market. And although the Polo Vivo is kind of climbed to being a bit more expensive than these more entry-level vehicles, it still fundamentally offers what they offer. It's just packed in slightly more expensive German wrapping. I mean, this segment of cars, the budget car segment, has become so popular in the country that manufacturers are actually starting to notice how popular it's becoming and starting to shift their focus towards producing more of them. It's kind of like what we talked about in the video about bakkies. Manufacturers realized that bakkies were becoming more popular as status symbols than practical tools, so they started turning them into and marketing them as luxury vehicles. And like the status symbol bakkie segment, the small economy car segment is still relatively in its early stages, and I feel like it's going to only continue to keep growing and growing and growing in the next few years, especially considering that our economy is not gonna get better in the next few years. It just won't. So yeah, there's still a lot of potential for growth in this segment. And that's a good thing because budget cars give access to mobility to the masses. It's a good thing when people can move around more easily. But that greater access to mobility is also something that creates some really interesting scenarios. Scenarios like Stan's culture, an entire community built around slamming and modifying these types of budget-friendly cars. And scenarios like the rise of the Polo driver, a stereotype that is so often accurate that you start to wonder if it is in fact a fact and not a stereotype.
This car has a proper handbrake, so you can do hooligan handbrake turns if you want to.
The Polo driver is a term normally used to describe young, reckless and aggressive drivers who kind of overtake anywhere they want to overtake and like showing off when they're on the road. Culturally, the Polo driver stereotype is characterized by being just very socially dominant, just being everywhere all at once. Owning a Polo, any kind of Polo, is somehow akin to owning a GTI. Or that's what Polo drivers think, at least. These cars tend to be aspirational. They tend to be the first sign that you're doing well in life. So when someone finally gets their hands on it, they want to be as socially visible as possible. Now, obviously, there's nuance in everything. The Polo driver stereotype doesn't necessarily describe everyone who owns a Polo, but I would venture as far as to say it represents a majority of people who own Polos. And the data kind of backs me up in this respect because VW Polos are overrepresented in road accidents, and insurance companies list them as some of the most accident prone and stolen vehicles in the country. The Polo driver stereotype has become so synonymous with just really questionable driving and a general lack of road manners that it is starting to get on the same level of notoriety as the taxi driver stereotype. A stereotype that I think we all know is not a stereotype. I don't even need to describe it to you. If you have a license, you have experienced taxi driver driving in your life, you know it's not a stereotype. That one is real. I will say that with my heart. The taxi driver stereotype is a fact. It's not a stereotype at all. But the reason for the Polo driver stereotype is everything that we've been talking about in this video. These are relatively affordable and kind of quick cars that almost anyone has access to. I mean, the VW Polo and Polo Vivo being some of the best-selling cars in the country means that you're gonna see them absolutely everywhere. Young, inexperienced drivers with egotistic chips on their shoulders are able to afford these cars relatively easily and wreak havoc on our roads. I mean, our drinking and driving crisis also kind of doesn't help that issue, but I made a whole video about that if you want to check that out as well. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Polo drivers are the worst perpetrators in terms of drunk driving in this country. I am saying though that a lot of people who are more prone to drunk driving also happen to own Polo Vivos and Polos in general. Of course, correlation doesn't mean causation, but if it walks like an alcoholic duck and it quacks like an alcoholic duck, it's probably an alcoholic duck. That joke took everything from me to not burst out in laughter saying, so like the video for that joke. That was a really good joke. Like the video. Anyways, at the end of the day, the VW Polo Vivo isn't just a car. It's a reflection of South Africa itself. Born from the ashes of the Citi Golf, it carried forward the characteristics that made the Citi Golf an icon in the first place. And that is simplicity, reliability, and accessibility. But over time, it also became way more than just that. It became a status symbol, a cultural identifier, and in many ways, a social equalizer. For some, it's the first sign of real progress in their lives. And for others, it's just a cheap car that's easy to maintain and that is really reliable. But collectively, it has become a part of our national story. This is the car that you see in every township, suburb, and parking lot all over the country. And maybe that's why the Polo Vivo has continued to dominate our automotive industry for this long, and why I think it's going to continue to dominate our auto industry for a very long time, is that it isn't about simply just getting from point A to point B. It's about everything in between. It's about where we've been as a country and where we're still trying to go. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Do make sure you check out our membership offers to see if that's something you would be interested in subscribing to. We are also trying to reach 10,000 subscribers before the end of the year, so do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you have subscribed to the channel already, please click the bell icon so that you get notified every time that we make an upload. But yeah, until the next one, thank you guys very much for watching, and goodbye.